Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the show. We are going to be, sort of as the playoffs approach, talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo and his injury status. He, of course, went down with a non-contact calf injury on his left leg that he's been dealing with a couple various injuries, including some hamstring, and I believe he briefly missed with a calf as well. Since the start of March, and now he is officially expected to not be ready for the start of the Bucks' first round matchup against the Indiana Pacers, which does hurt them. The Pacers are a team that are young and hungry and have really come on this past season and have given the Bucks some trouble in their matchups where, again, I feel like I say this all the time now, regular season series have never meant less in the NBA in terms of how it projects for the postseason, and the Bucks still have loads more experience than the Pacers do. Pacers, really outside of Pascal Siakam, who was a mid-season acquisition, don't have anybody on the roster that is a part of a real NBA playoffs run. So, as for Milwaukee, they definitely are vulnerable. I think the Pacers, even with a fully healthy Giannis, were at risk of being upset, and now this just gives that much more of an edge to the Indiana Pacers. I actually want to look up what the series odds are, because I would imagine that the Bucks are still favored, but at the same time, I would not be surprised whatsoever if this is much closer to even. We've seen a handful of these series that are already being put out there as far as who is favored. We know the 6-seeded Suns are favored over the Timberwolves. The 5-seeded Mavericks are favored over the Clippers. So should be very interesting to see here. Yeah, the odds definitely dropped, because I think the last time I looked, the Bucks were something along the lines of minus 250, and now they are minus 135 after this news comes out. So we will see how this plays out. Giannis's calf strain, it's an injury that typically the recovery period is about 2 to 3 weeks. Now, Giannis, of course, is a massive human being, which does definitely play a role in the recovery time in all of this. We don't have, I don't think, the exact date in terms of when the Bucks are tipping off. Maybe we do, but it is going to be a playoff series that tips off either 11 or 12 days after Giannis suffered this injury. So, going to be interesting to see. We've talked about this just about every time we've talked about Giannis and this injury, is the fact that Kevin Durant, somebody who has very similar size, maybe not necessarily weight-wise, but at least with height, he forced himself to come back a little bit earlier in the 2019 playoffs and ended up missing the entire 2020 season as a result of a torn Achilles on that same leg. For Milwaukee here, this season has been filled with turmoil for them, and you obviously, especially after being upset by Miami in the first round last year, there's going to be an extreme level of pressure to succeed, and with Giannis specifically, we have seen him be able to recover from these injuries at a very remarkable speed, to be able to, his injury that he suffered in the 2021 playoffs against the Hawks to come back for the finals, and even last year when he was dealing with his injury and sort of toughed it out as much as he could. And this Bucks organization, like I talked about yesterday, is under extreme amounts of pressure in my eyes because of the fact that they decided to fire Mike Budenholzer just a couple seasons after he won them the finals in 2021, and they moved on from Drew Holiday to find an upgrade, in at least what they thought, in Damian Lillard. This adds an extra level of pressure to Lillard, who, again, like I said, I think it might be a little bit unfair at this point with Lillard being 34 years old to have his legacy be determined by a series like this. But for, some degree to the amount of buy-in that the Bucks did to, go in and grab a Damian Lillard, this is where he's supposed to step up in these types of moments. So we will see how this all plays out. I do feel like this is going to be a very important stretch of games here for the Bucks. Like, no duh, obviously they're playoff games, but in terms of how the organization is viewed, because there's a chance that this doesn't work out for them. This could be a series that could end. I mean, realistically, if Giannis isn't going to play in this game as a whole, if the Pacers won and call it 6 games, I wouldn't be shocked necessarily. I believe, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head how many games it took for Miami to knock out the Bucks last year. I feel like it was in 5, but it would not be shocking to me if the Pacers, who are this, up and coming team, definitely aren't scared of Milwaukee based off of how the regular season's played out. I think they won 4 of 5 matchups against the Bucks this year, and they are going to be, all in for this. Outside of the Benedict Mathurin injury, they are just about fully healthy here. Yesterday we talked about the idea of which, young player is going to come out and grab national headlines, even just with a hot start in the first round. I feel like Tyrese Halliburton could absolutely be a candidate for that type of national media attention, because really when he was garnering all that attention earlier in the year, it was when he led the Pacers to a win over the Bucks during the play-in tournament in that knockout round. So it's very possible that the Pacers could end up embarrassing the Bucks here a little bit, and where things go from there, I'm not totally sure. I believe that after this season, there is only 1 year left on Damian Lillard's contract. I know Stephen A. Smith was talking about the fact that Lillard wants out and that he isn't going to want to stay there long term. It looks like he does have just 1 last year on his contract after this. And if you know that he's not going to re-sign, I mean, I feel like it's tough to sort of move on fully from Lillard, because they're still bought in for a championship or bust, essentially, as these next years go on. I think he actually might also have a player option in the 2026-27 season. They might have given him a contract extension. SpotRack, the website I use for the 4-player contracts, added this whole new other upcoming contract extension feature that is a little bit more complicated for me, but it does seem like he actually might be through 2025-26 and then have a player option. So yeah, I don't know. Stephen A. Smith has been talking about the idea of the Bucks should trade him if he's not happy there. I feel like they're just in no way going to get the same level of return in terms of value that they gave up in the first place. So, especially with Lillard, who spent so much of his career in Portland sort of putting off the demanding out in a trade, I feel like it would be sort of uncharacteristic of him to do so next year. But I just feel like in terms of making this trade count that they did to go and get Damian Lillard, he is going to need to step up in this moment and in this series for as long as Giannis is not able to be there. And I think the other person who this really comes as an inflection point for their legacy is Doc Rivers, where he's been very heavily criticized throughout the course of the season after the Bucks got off to this hot start and Adrian Griffin, this rookie head coach, ends up getting fired. Rivers, who has had a pretty bumpy stretch over the past few years in the postseason, he ends up taking the job, and the team staggers from a regular season perspective. Again, there were flashes of their defense getting better and them looking like more of a legitimate contender coming out of specifically the All-Star break, but has been very rocky since then as well. And I do feel like it's going to be very difficult to try and overcome this Pacers team who has the fastest paced offense in the league this season, and a Bucks team that has not been exceptional on defense, especially in transition. So I don't know what he is going to be able to sort of apply in this series that's going to right their wrongs, but it is a very interesting conversation, and there's a lot of legacies I feel like somewhat on the line for the Bucks moving forward here. But that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. We run from 2 to 3 Eastern every weekday, so you can catch us again tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Follow us on socials as well. But we will see you tomorrow afternoon. Have a good one. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.